Good morning. Welcome to Sacred Breeze Inclusive Faith Community Gathering of August 4th, 2024. We're live in our Sati Nakuchi, Georgia studio, and it's another beautiful day. And we appreciate everyone who joins us and everyone who watches this video later when it's posted. And we're going to share an insight that's a separate video that will be posted as well, separate, for people who do not want to sit through the entire program, but it's not a long program. It's a 10-15 minutes of content and the 15 minute insight, so it's not a long program. So without hesitation, let us begin. Let's see, where am I? Display capture. There it is. Greetings and welcome. The purpose of our gathering is to encourage one another to recognize and cultivate inclusive, unconditional love and creativity within each our own cultures and faiths of origin. We follow a particular order in our gatherings, and each section of our gatherings is punctuated with the sound of a gong. If I can do this right. We will try to have one of these gatherings on the first Sunday of every month. So far we've been doing okay since June, I think we started. The videos of the gatherings and separate videos of the shared insights will be made available through our website at sacredbreeze.org. And if you want to be notified of events like this community gathering, and if anything else comes up, please sign up with our Connect on our Connect page at sacredbreeze.org, and we will email you. So, without further delay, let us begin. Our community identity statement is as follows. Number 1, we are love-centered and inclusive. All who wish to be a part of our community are welcome. Number 2, we celebrate Divine Spirit, source of all life and consciousness. We believe that Spirit is always with us, inspiring love, healing, reconciliation, community, and creative gifts. Number 3, we celebrate the inherent sacred worth of every human being and every living creature. Number 4, we celebrate our own creative gifts. We develop and share our creative gifts for the benefit of ourselves and others. Number 5, we are a diverse community, and this is true. We celebrate the diversity of humanity, life, and creation on this planet and throughout the cosmos. Number 6, we celebrate diverse faiths and traditions from which humanity draws meaning and inspiration. We lift up unconditional love and inclusivity in all faiths and traditions. Number 7, we are self-aware and resilient. We accept that as human beings we have limitations, we make mistakes, and our physical bodies will eventually die. Number 8, we are aware of predatory and destructive forces that work within ourselves and others. Therefore, we maintain healthy boundaries for our own well-being and for the well-being of others. Number 9, we recognize that self-care is both our right and our responsibility. Our ability to develop and share creative gifts depends on maintaining our own physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being and health. And number 10, we aspire to encounter others with patience and compassion, using our creative gifts to cultivate love, healing, and reconciliation when and where we can. Okay, after sharing our statement of purpose, we do a little time of sharing the concerns that we have for ourselves and others. We recognize the sacred spirit who unites us regardless of our faiths and cultural backgrounds. And we recognize that sacred spirit calls us to seek out and to share inclusive, unconditional love. The voice of sacred spirit can be discerned in all faiths and traditions. We recognize, accept, and share gratitude for the spirit who abides, comforts, and inspires love, healing, and reconciliation. We open our hearts and our minds to divine spirit, who inspires development and sharing of our creative gifts. And we all have creative gifts. So let's take a moment to recognize and be grateful for the divine spirit that abides with us and with all of humanity and creation. Let's open our hearts. Let's open our minds. Let's be grateful for the gifts that we have. Grateful for the divine spirit that abides. We recognize that life has challenges we cannot control. We also recognize that lifting up and sharing the things we cannot control lightens our burdens and reminds us that we are not alone. As a community, we abide with each other, just as Spirit abides with us. So let's take a moment to recognize our own challenges, be they physical, emotional, or spiritual. Lord knows we all have challenges to lift up. Physical issues, family issues, emotional issues. Even spiritual challenges. I can't quite describe, but there they are. Now, let's take a moment to recognize the challenges and suffering that others face and endure. Let us allow the suffering and challenges we recognize to increase our compassion for ourselves and others. And I'm going to lift up my friend James, who continues recovery issues, physical recovery issues. I'm going to lift up both churches that I attend, the Nakuchi Presbyterian and Jensen Beach Community Church, and all the ministries that they hold dear, and all the people that they help. I'm going to lift up 9th District Opportunities and my friend Michael Fish for caring for the homeless population in North Georgia. And I lift up all homeless ministries. I've been involved in that ministry with homeless people in recovery especially. And it's very challenging and very rewarding. So we're going to lift up I'm going to lift up the Nishimura family who's dealing with grief right now. And if you have concerns and you want to type them in the comments, that's fine. Or just lift them up in your own heart. Know that we are community and we share our burdens together. We lift them up together. And we hope in reconciliation and healing together. Now let's take a moment to recognize with gratitude the strengths and the creative gifts that we have within our own community. Let's take a moment to be grateful for our own strengths and gifts. And let us take a moment to be grateful for the strengths and gifts that others share for our benefit and for the benefit of everyone. And here we might think of our own gifts that we share with others. Might think of teachers who have been special to us and family members who have helped us along the way, friends. Just having some gratitude. Okay, this is the point where I share insight that I prepared for this month. And the insight for this month discusses whether God is real. I'm interested in your comments on this. It may get a little bit muddled here and there, but please follow through. The point I'm trying to make in this insight is that the effects of our faith are real, and therefore the source, the causes for our faith are real, and the effects can have long-lasting effects. And if the God we lift up is a source of love and grace, then those effects can last long past us. But if the God we lift up also carries negative aspects, that can have lasting impact as well. So please enjoy this insight. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Sacred Breeze Insight for August 4th, 2024, where we explore the question, is God real? Center myself here. There we go. Is God real? If you were to ask this question to 100 people, you would no doubt get several answers of absolute yes, several answers of absolute no. Outside of the solid answers, you'd probably get a great many nuanced answers that basically say, I don't know, or there's no way of knowing. All good answers depending on the context from which the answer is provided. Of course, from the group that answers an absolute yes, a follow-up question of who is God would result in a full range of possibilities. But we're not going to go there today. We're sticking with the question, is God real? In our explorations of God in spirit, we often speak from the JCI perspective, that is Judeo-Christian Islamic faith, and from the Buddhist non-theistic perspective. I suspect a good Buddhist would answer the question with, it doesn't really matter whether God is real or not. All things in this universe are impermanent. And that recognizing and accepting the impermanence of everything in the universe holds the key to liberating self and others from the impermanence of existence. And of course, the Buddhist perspective is absolutely accurate. This universe, this existence is impermanent. And just as relationships, joy, and new life are part of this universe, so are separation, loss, suffering, and death. These are the realities of this existence. Along with impermanence, karma, or cause and effect, are part of the reality of this existence as well. I mention realities because in order to answer the question of whether God is real, we need to define what real is. According to the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and you can Google that, something is objectively real if it exists independent of conscious awareness. So we're going to go with that definition, if it exists independent of conscious awareness. For example, a tree in a forest exists whether or not it has been discovered and cataloged by biologists, surveyors, and conservationists or not. And the realities of this universe also exist independent of conscious awareness. Whether anyone's there to notice it or not, the universe has impermanence, cause, and effect. Now, God is characterized by JCI and other traditions as anything but impermanent. Theologically, God is often characterized as inherently immortal and eternal. Since the universe objectively includes loss, suffering, and death, it would seem that God is not easily characterized as objectively real from the perspective of human conscious awareness. Indeed, one might question whether conscious awareness itself exists. This is where cause and effect comes in. In nature, physical laws dictate the position and motion of objects and the absorption and release of energy, with or without conscious observation or involvement. Conscious life, on the other hand, sets its own course. Of course, living creatures behave within the constraints of physical laws, but within those constraints, physical life pretty much sets its own course and agenda. And the course by physical life is most often in pursuit of life, relationship, procreating, and avoidance of suffering, and even in joyful play. One might say that the conscious awareness of a living creature helps set the course and activities pursued by the living creature. In other words, the cause behind what living creatures do is conscious awareness. And the effects of conscious activities exist with or without conscious awareness, sometimes after the consciousness is long gone. Objects such as houses, furniture, and toys continue to exist long after designers and fabricators have moved on. Likewise, the effects of conscious destruction exist after the causes have moved on. The earth is scarred and graveyards are filled with the objective results of conscious destruction. With or without conscious awareness, those scars and graves continue to exist. So while one might debate the realness of conscious activities, the effects of conscious activities are real indeed. Now, one might ask the question, what motivates living consciousness to create or destroy? For the most part, conscious decisions, both creative and destructive, are motivated by instincts held in common by all life forms, as we know them. The drive to survive and to form relationships and to procreate, to avoid suffering, and to seek out joy are common to all living creatures, including humans. Now, for theistic JCI folks, the objective effects of consciousness proving the existence of consciousness, say that again, the objective effects of consciousness proving the existence of consciousness would be sufficient to prove that God is real. The fact that creation exists can easily be interpreted as the effect of the causal activities of a greater cosmic consciousness. Now, for skeptical atheists, scientists, and non-theists, a cause and effect argument is not sufficient to prove that God is real. They might argue that mere existence of something does not necessarily imply a cause or its existence. That would be an interesting discussion to pursue. But for the purpose of this insight, let's take a look from a more close-up and personal level, rather than a larger cosmic level. We've already argued that the effects of conscious action of living creatures are real, especially the conscious actions of human beings. We tend to create effects that last long beyond our years. We may be the only creature that does that. Humans are the source of wonderful creations and horrifying destructions, all of which are real. Now, some would argue that miraculous direct intervention from a real God proves the existence of God. They would point to anecdotal examples of perhaps accidents avoided or healing received, and even death of perceived enemies, all at the hands of a real God who intervenes directly in human affairs. Now, so far, none of these anecdotal experiences have been proven scientifically as evidence of a real God. Others, perhaps with less vehemence, would describe incidents where they received divine inspiration that motivated their actions. Unfortunately, there's no way to prove or disprove whether inspiration or action is divine or otherwise. Or is there? Either way, as was discussed earlier, the effects of any actions taken are real. When a person refers to God, they usually refer to an impression of an entity that's formed from a mixture of influences, scripture, culture, traditions passed on through families, and understandings received through relationships. And for many people, a reference would also be made to a sense of direct communication or intervention from a higher power. The same can be said about communities of believers. Whether those outside influences, natural or supernatural in origin, create a sense of meaning and purpose for the individual or community depends on that individual and community. When the connection occurs, the relationship is formed, and belief is sparked, this higher power, this God, becomes part of the causal motivation for actions that have effects. One might say that higher consciousness influences personal or even community consciousness to act. A cause and effect relationship is formed, and the effects are real. Now, many people in recovery will tell you with conviction that were it not for the influence of a higher power, they would still be drinking, using, gambling, whatever, and might be dead now. You hear that from people if you ask. And there's truth to that statement. Now, cynics will say that the testimony of a person in recovery doesn't prove or disprove whether God is real or not. But the effects of that outside influence are as real as forests or sunshine or trees are real. But the influence of God is not always positive, is it? There are many who have claimed that with the outside influence of God, they were inspired and motivated to bring, for example, death and destruction. Those effects are real as well. And the attribution to a higher power, higher consciousness, for influencing personal and community consciousness to bring destruction is real as well. I don't know about you, but the fact that effects both uplifting and destructive can be and are attributed to a causal higher power is a little scary to me. It seems that God is real, especially for people receiving inspiration, because the effects are real, but the effects can inspire comfort and healing and reconciliation, or suffering, death, and separation. It's almost like there are multiple gods, isn't it? Some positive and uplifting, and others who are negative and inspiring death and destruction. It's no wonder many people throw up their hands and give up on the idea of God altogether. From a human perspective, God may be considered the culmination of all that we lift up as true and good, however we define true and good. For many, the definition of true and good is a mixed bag. For many, true and good means healing and grace, as well as control and power for self and perhaps for fellow believers or members of a community. True and good also means suffering and death for those perceived as enemies or non-believers. And history carries many, many examples of suffering imposed through forced conversions. Whether it's being forced to give up on being left-handed, or forced to hide one's sexual orientation, or forced to release or change one's culture and religion. This is what mixed bag believers lift up. Their actions follow their beliefs. Again, the effects of this mixed bag theology are real, which makes the causal inspiration, the God they lift up, very real indeed. It's tempting to say the real God inspires only love, healing, and reconciliation for all people, regardless of culture, religion, or orientation. And every religion and culture includes scripture and tradition that inspires inclusive, unconditional love. But every religion and culture also includes scripture and tradition that inspires exclusion and justifies imposing suffering and death on others. Now, at Sacred Breeze, we attribute all that is good and true to unconditional, inclusive love for all people. We celebrate diversity, we celebrate culture, and we celebrate faith. This is the inspiration that motivates our actions. We hear it through the voices of the diverse cultures, Judeo-Christian, Islamic, Buddhism, Hinduism, Neo-paganism, and many others. We recognize it through the actions of anyone and everyone who offers healing and hope, even and especially in the midst of suffering and fear. Unconditional, inclusive love motivates our actions. Our community identity statement recognizes that while we lift up unconditional, inclusive love, in the real world, sometimes we must create healthy boundaries and acknowledge our own limitations. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes our mistakes are intentional. In short, we are human. But our common spirit, the spirit that calls out from all faiths and all traditions for unconditional, inclusive love, is very real. So to answer the question, is God real? Based on the effects, both positive and negative, inspired by and attributed to God, God is very real. And given that God is real and that people lift up that which they believe to be true, right, and good, the next question becomes, what is true, right, and good? Our hope is that people from all traditions, faiths, and cultures seek out the still small voice that inspires unconditional, inclusive love for all. May we all lift up unconditional, inclusive love as that which is true, right, and good. And may the call and the inspiration of Dharma, Chesed, Arahim, and grace be heard and heeded by all peoples everywhere. Amen, and thank you for taking the time to listen. Have a blessed day. So yeah, there you go. The effects of faith are real. So the question becomes, what do we have faith in? The question of whether an objective, separate, other God exists outside of our perception and our interpretation and the effects that we generate. That's another question we'll explore later. But that's the message for today. The effects are real. So now is our tradition. Before we close, we're going to engage in a little meditation, a little release of distractions, a little acceptance of grace. This is a mind stabilization meditation. If you explore the website, you'll see other meditations. But this is basic mind stabilization, and it's something that's good to practice. We're going to start by sitting up straight. We're going to breathe from our diaphragms. That means recognizing our stomachs are raising and falling. Breathe from the diaphragm because that generates the most oxygen, brings in the most oxygen. Martial artists and opera singers and athletes, swimmers all understand that diaphragm breathing generates power and peace. As we inhale, we imagine our breath sweeping in and cleansing every part of our body. And every breath we take really literally does circulate through every cell in our body. So it's fair to then imagine that spirit, breath, ruach, life, courses through us with every breath. Now, as we breathe, we're going to recognize that there are distractions. First of all, we're going to notice there are distractions around us, outside of us. There may be family members that are talking or carrying on. There may be TVs, radios in the background, music. Whatever those distractions are, what we're going to do is we're going to accept them. One by one, we're going to recognize the distractions, accept them, and just let them go. This is the real power of meditation. It's not in control, it's in acceptance. Once we accept and release the outside distractions, and if we continue to be distracted, that's okay. We accept and we just return our attention to our breathing. That's what the breathing is for. It's our point of focus. It's like our safe home. Our breath is always with us, no matter where we are. Once we accept and release outside distractions, we may notice our own body has some distractions. We may notice some itches, urge to cough, little things distracting in our own bodies. That is natural. That's part of relaxing. And our number one rule here in meditation is to be kind to ourselves. So if we need to scratch, feel free to scratch. Need to cough, that's okay. Do what we need to do to make ourselves comfortable, and then return our attention to our breathing. Once we release the distractions of our bodies, we're going to notice our brains are working. And you know, that's normal, and that's great. Not even going to try to control our brains. We have thoughts and we have feelings all the time. Our brains are working all the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to recognize our thoughts one by one and accept them and let them go. As feelings arise, we're going to recognize them and accept them. And as we recognize our thoughts and feelings, that increases our mindfulness, our awareness of how we tick, which is healthy as well. Our thoughts and feelings are like clouds drifting across the blue mind of our sky. We just notice them with interest and we accept them and we watch them drift on by. Once again, as we breathe, we recognize that with every inhale, healing grace pours through our body, loosening up places that are locked and blocked, loosening up those little spots where there's issues, pains and fears and anxieties as they settle in different parts of our bodies. We're going to imagine our breath sweeping in and bringing cleansing and healing. With every exhale, we're going to recognize that all that pain and suffering that we're holding on to is going to release. All those little anxieties are going to dissipate as we exhale. Just as every breath sweeps in and cleanses, brings oxygen to every cell, spiritual energy also brings healing and relief to every cell. And just as every exhale cleanses out carbon dioxide, we can release. Every exhale also releases negative energy that's cleansed from our cells. Now we're going to allow ourselves to feel unconditional positive regard toward ourselves. We're going to extend our awareness to others in our household and allow ourselves unconditional positive regard for them as well. Expanding our awareness out to our neighborhoods and out to our nature that it surrounds us. The fish in the brooks and the streams, the creatures. Unconditional positive regard. Expanding outward to include everyone within our local towns. our states and provinces, wherever we live. Unconditional positive regard. Expanding our awareness out to the countries in which we live, towards all the people in our countries. Unconditional positive regard. And finally, I'm going to imagine the entire world, all the people, all the living creatures. It's an amazing thing, this world. This beautiful blue planet. All the creatures in the oceans. Unconditional positive regard towards everyone and everything. With that, we will open ourselves up from our meditation. And now in closing, we're going to suggest that we abide in peace, engage in self-care, develop and share our creative gifts for the benefit of ourselves and others, that we might participate in the inspiration, inspiring love, healing, creativity, and reconciliation wherever we can, wherever possible, allowing our own faith to create actions and causations that are full of love and reconciliation, inclusive love. Namaste, and thank you for joining me.